darlings, how are you? It's about time I did this, so I'm going to do it now. When I published this wonderful book, Earthwalkers, Children of the Light, I was in very early stages of grieving and I really didn't introduce you to the book very well, so I'm doing it now. I'm going to read you the author's note and the first chapter of the book. It is just so full of magic, and remember, this was written 11 years ago now. Yes, it was. It went to Amazon #1 bestseller, I think, in a day. So thank you to everybody that's bought it already, and I will be creating an audiobook. So let's go ahead, shall we? And let me introduce you to my fictional book, Spiritual Fact. It's listed as spiritual fantasy, and just introduce you to the wonderment of this story. I still don't know if it's going to be a dual book or a trilogy. I have to wait for them to download the information for me. I think it's going to be a trilogy, but let's see what happens. #2 is nearly finished. It's 3/4 of the way through, so I've got to get my writing energy in gear. I'm going to put my glasses on like an old teacher. Yes, I am. And let's get on, shall we? I dedicated this book to my babies, but I also wrote this as a dedication to Darren. To the island in my ocean, the sun in my storms, the star in my darkness, the joy in my pain, the love of my life and soul, Darren. May you be beaming down on me with your eternal beauty and heart-melting smile with pride, peace and light. See you when I am perfect enough as you to come home and be in your arms again. Moving on swiftly before I lose it. Okay, author's note. Here we go. Enjoy. It was the morning of Sunday, the 9th of February 2014 that significantly changed my life forever. I had the most magnificent dream, which in hindsight must have been psychic channeling. I can usually tell the difference because I come from a long line of psychic mediums and have been seeing the entrance to heaven since I was 4 years old. I was awoken from the most delicious adventure at 8 a.m. and was told to go back to sleep by a discarnate voice. The end of my download woke me at midday. I know that we cannot dream for 4 hours, so something profound had happened. What had unfolded in those precious 4 hours was a movie playing out in my subconscious that I've no doubt came from heaven. Despite me being in the throes of excruciating agony and life-stealing chronic fatigue following a road accident, I was like a woman possessed. Whenever I could type, I relayed everything I dreamt, remembering every name, place and dimension with amazing clarity. On hitting the good old Google button, just out of curiosity, the names of most characters in this book aligned to those in the Old Testament, especially the angels. Places that I knew nothing of in the Crystal Palace, home of the angels, were also mentioned. I realised that some of the Bible was most probably true. I was somewhat bemused by this, as I'd always thought the Bible was some lovely multi-translated fiction written back in the day about an amazing ascended master and medium that walked the planet by the name of Jesus. This channeling absorbed my every waking moment, and this book took just 3 months to write. You have to understand that this was a formidable feat, bearing in mind that most of the time I was catatonic, unable to see clearly and in agonising pain with every finger tap on the keyboard. The most incredible thing about this book is that I assumed it should be fiction, as the plot that continually downloaded into my head organically from the dream seemed to be far too far-fetched. However, on seeing the events that have transpired on the planet from 10 years ago, this is a factual and prophetic warning from the divine that we are slowly killing the planet and everyone in it. I sat on this for a while, jiggling with its genre, but decided that the characters were just too good to let go. It was also deemed in no uncertain terms by the angelic realms to be left as spiritual fantasy so that we could bring more sheep into the fold. This is the first book of a series that I think will be a trilogy, but I'll have to wait and see what is downloaded to my soul from up above. I stopped writing the second at the end of 2014. When I surrendered to the havoc being wrought on my well-being and faith by my mutinous ME and fibromyalgia-riddled body. You will see when book 2 comes out that the prophecies within have taken place in the world as well. This story has remained on my laptop as it was not ready to go out to the universe back then. It just didn't feel right. The vibration of humanity wasn't ready to receive their divine message. At the time, while still in crisis, I also felt the book would go nowhere, no one would be interested. Since then, most of our population has become acutely aware of the crisis that this planet is under. Weather disasters, corrupt elites, plastic pollution, animal abuse, puppet political leaders, COVID, global warming, human trafficking and war are just some of the issues hitting humanity. Now that there are more awakened souls on the planet than ever before as we enter into the age of Aquarius, it's time to release this channeled information, or should I say, fictional story. I have literally relayed everything that was shown to me and have no angst against any religion. However you perceive this book as either a fantasy romance or a book of prophecy, I'm sure the magic that coursed through me as I wrote it will imprint something quite poignant in your heart, mind and soul as you turn each page. Your beliefs, religious views or stance on angels has no bearing on this story. As far as I have seen, there is only one thing we should invest in whilst existing on this wonderfully diverse planet, and that is love. Enjoy the mystery, enjoy the thrill, but do not forget the fundamental underlying message that threads its way through this wonderful tale. Oh, it's good, isn't it? I want to read it myself. I have, many times. So this is the prologue. She stood on top of Mount Snowdon, embracing the icy blast of wind that screamed through her russet red hair. Her autumnal tresses danced in the incessant gale. As she felt every gust of wind, she willed its freshness to cleanse her mind and soul of the fury and despair that whirled around it, eating away at any feeling of hope or triumph. She let out a long, bewildered sigh as she looked out onto the mountain ridges. They exuded strength, purity and heritage. They represented how it had been at the beginning. Nature, in its rawest, most magnificent form, had maintained her sublime love for this planet. The smile that had whispered across her lips disappeared as she focused on the world that stood before her today. Her mouth thinned and she gritted her teeth at the thought of the inhabitants that she had helped to create. Her milky white forehead creased in fury as she recalled her recent global visits. All she could see in her mind was the darkness, rainforests being ripped down, plastics defiling her oceans, and sea inhabitants. Humans being maimed, killed and brutalised in the name of religion and war. Tycoons counting their millions, passing while sat on their fat leather seats in their plushy, shiny vehicles that coughed a stench into the ozone layer as they passed starving children in the street. Animals being tortured for the next human skin product, children shivering in corners desperate to become the shadow that their parents had made them. Thieves, cheats, murderers, slayers of mankind and the planet. The visions flashed through her mind like a tormented nightmare. She couldn't see the light any longer. She had lost touch with the good people who were being swallowed by the powerful and the tyrannical. They didn't deserve to be on this planet any longer. They took it for granted. Unaware that she'd started a low undulating moan, it soon rose to an earth-shattering scream. The pain of her labour being desecrated, a cry for mercy was all she could hear echoing through the planet. She cupped her ears to try and stop the sounds and sank to the stony peak of the colossal mountain. In between frantic gasps of breath, she screamed on, expressing her pain and surrender. Tears streamed down her face with the grief that consumed her. She looked up to the cloudy sky beneath which sat a soft mist that resolutely sailed over the stunning craggy peaks. Father, I have done everything I can. It is time. I am done here. Everything I do is futile. She screamed the last words with venom and outrage. This place needs to die in glory and not rot by the hands of its inhabitants. I am done. Take me home. She stood expectantly. She received no reply. She had been forsaken. Then so be it. If no one chose to listen, she would rip every molecule into pieces that shaped this planet and the ignorant inhabitants that dwelled upon it. She bent over double, holding her torso, rocking backwards and forwards like a child needing a comforting, reassuring hug. She rocked for what seemed an eternity as she absorbed the words she had just screamed out loud. Enough was enough. Billions of years, billions of hardships, fighting for a cause that she now knew was lost. Once again, her grief swung to complete rage. She smashed her fists into the Welsh rock and watched the mountains shake. The strength of her blow sent shudders through the peaks, rippling across the valley like the impact of a lone stone tossed into a silent mill pond. Through tear-stained eyes, she watched the effects of her rage thunder along the terrain. With a laden sigh, she blinked away the sight, no longer caring for the consequences. Right, let's delve into chapter 1, shall we? I'm just going to have a little sip. New tribe cups. Tell you about that later. Chapter 1, the first rebellion. The bed shook in regular violent bursts. Ali gripped the sheets like her life depended on it. Her breath quickened as she watched the photograph of her parents jump along the bedside cabinet as if being pushed by an invisible hand. The bedroom walls seemed to blur into a kaleidoscope of colour with each groaning shake. She had witnessed many inexplicable things in her 21 years, but this was a pretty hard one to swallow. Car alarms started to signal their discontent on being disturbed by this unprecedented disruption. Ali leapt from her bed and ran over to the curtains, throwing them open. Lights from the car alarm sent a path of flickering illumination like a landing strip along the Romford Road in the otherwise dark night. Wheelie bins were being turned over by the force of the quaking land beneath them. Cats were whining as they ran, panicked, back to their homes. What the hell was going on? She gripped hold of the windowsill, willing for the shaking to stop. She jumped and let out a tiny gasp as the photograph of her parents fell to the floor and shattered. Her stomach lurched, mirroring the waves of energy shuddering around her. She could feel her fingernails bite into the soft wood as the next quake shattered through her body. Her breathing became short gasps as the whirling started in her head. Beads of sweat wound their way down the back of her spine. She could feel her legs weaken. Panic rose in her throat as she lulled into semi-consciousness. It was then that the flashes ripped through her mind. Lightning bolts of random visions hit her one after the other. Her muted moans seemed to come from a surreal distance as the visions became stronger. Quick flashes of crumbling mountains, crying babies, trees being ripped down and howling animals caught in vicious traps rapidly savaged her thoughts. She was vaguely aware that she was swaying violently, her legs barely supporting her. The images then ceased as she focused in her mind on a little girl standing in a shimmering room. The angelic face, surrounded by an abundance of blonde hair, stared into her soul. Ali could feel herself reeling towards the face, the blue eyes willing her closer, the smile shining brighter. Ali could smell the floral scent of this innocent child's breath. She then froze an inch from the girl's face as the breath whispered across her skin. The clear blue eyes began to cloud over, the whites displaying needle-like veins, red and angry. The face started to crease into a deep frown as the girl's skin turned ashen. Her cherubic pink lips turned blue and then hastily shaded to black. Her breath now smelt vile, the pungent aroma making Ali feel nauseous. Whilst the child continued to stare into Ali's terrified eyes, it snarled as its face changed to a malicious mask of anger and insipid intent, bringing Ali to her senses. She screamed hysterically, willing herself to be as far away from this creature as possible. She then felt that she was present, back in her room, nails painfully broken, her body aching with fear. She took a few breaths, trying to ground herself. She could see her reflection in the window and focused on her image, terrified that the beast would return to her mind. Her azure blue eyes shone in sheer terror as she looked back at herself. A very rare frown was still prominent on her porcelain smooth face, and she ran a slender figure across her forehead with the intent of erasing it. Her white, blonde, wavy hair cascaded over her slim shoulders, framing her perfect face. Her pixie nose, as she called it, was still flaring from the onslaught that she had endured. She then stood squarely, pushing her shoulders back and feeling a sense of strength return. She continued to stare at her reflection to reassure herself that the quake had abruptly woken in the middle of a bad nightmare. As she breathed a deep sigh to steady her trembling body, she then saw her face in the mirror change. It widened to a woman with heavy cheekbones. Her hair turned flaming red as it started to dance in an unseen breeze. Azure blue eyes stared back at her, but they weren't her own. The woman's reflection became animated and leaned forward. "Remember," she demanded with a fiery glint in her eyes. The last thing Ali became aware of as she hit the ground was her scream before a silent peace that enveloped her. After nearly an hour of lying on the floor, Ali eventually opened her eyes and gazed up at her bedroom ceiling. She clumsily got to her feet and found herself standing at the window, feeling numb. Her eyes sought each end of the road for a possible encore of the earthquake. There was nothing. Everything was eerily still. The car alarms were silent, the unruly bins littering the street awaited rescue. Her ears strained for the groan that had accompanied the shaking. Again, not a thing. So she slowly crept back to her bed. Fear kept her awake. She sat wide-eyed and expectant of a repeat performance from the unexpected nighttime phenomenon. She held the broken photo frame like a comfort blanket in her shaking hands. Why had this disturbed her so much? It was surely a one-off earthquake, albeit rare for the UK. So why was she so unsettled by it? Had she been sleepwalking? Why should she dream of such horror and fearful images? Why did the red-haired siren seem so familiar? As the first streams of pink and gold light filtered through her window, she felt a sense of comfort and logic wash over her. As she looked back out onto the street, she surmised that it had been nothing but a bad dream. It was to be an important day after all. Perhaps the stress and excitement had got to her, she reasoned. She embraced the first signs of life as she watched the traffic queues slowly start to wind their way into Romford town centre. In contrast to the glum expression on every Essex driver's face, Ali's beaming smile resembled the unusual September sun that was attempting to lighten her room through the gloomy window pane and aged netting. Despite her night of terror, her excitement for the day fueled her, diminishing her fear. All of the darkness that seemed to shadow her soul started to dissipate. This was the day she'd been waiting months for. Ali listened to faint drifts of voices on the radio in the kitchen discussing last night's phenomena. She could just make out the words of an expert exclaiming that there had been no meteorological reason for the quake, stating that how it had taken place without any warning signs was a complete mystery. Ali sighed with relief because, mystery or not, it had just been a quake. But despite the logical side of her brain telling her this, a small hum of impending anxiety remained in her stomach. She chose to tune it out, as this was her day after all. Next little bit. She knew there would be consequences for her mutinous actions. She didn't care. As far as she could see, she'd been incarcerated in a dark cavern. She could just make out tiny glints of what she assumed were the gemstones that aligned most of the structures in this place. So what if she created the quake? She had much more planned than just a few tremors emanating from the Welsh hills. A supersonic boom then hit her body as a voice manifested into the cavern. "What were you thinking?" it demanded. "Now you answer me," she spat back in defiance. "You know that you have gone against my will. You are aware of our mission. Why are you trying to thwart what has been written?" The booming male voice had an edge of sadness laced through the anger. "You know that I despair of what has been written. I've already stated that this is all futile. My brothers and sisters agree." She obstinately pointed her strong chin out. "I care not of your siblings." His voice reverberated throughout the cavern, causing the structure to quiver by the sheer energy of his presence. "The High Court has made it so. You are fully aware. Do not make the mistake of your fallen brother. Remain here to gather yourself, daughter, and when you deserve to be in my presence, I shall summon you. You will not return to Earth until I allow it. You will certainly not try to reach them on Earth again. I witnessed your actions. I see everything. You have been warned. That will be all." A gush of wind signified his retreat. She let out a whimper. She felt humiliated, betrayed by her own father. The glint then returned, bringing burning coals of blue light back into her eyes. "I am not finished. I will find a way," she vowed, as she sank down onto the cold, stony surface. And it gets better, trust me. I'm going to read you the back. Do you know what? I should have done this at the beginning. Oh well. Endorsed by my darling friend, Dr. Christiane Northrup, New York Times best-selling author. So this is a synopsis on the back. As above, the High Court in the heavens has decreed Earth is in crisis. Archangel Ariel wants to end the planet, but the Omnipresent sees another way to help save humankind. The spiritual laws of the universe have been rewritten by Metatron. Can the celestial plane succeed, or will human intervention thwart it before it's even began? So below, the time is nigh, 2016. 8 strangers are brought to the Mermaid Centre in Wales to an outdoor pursuits adventure. All of this is a place I used to go to. It's inspired from all of my memories as well as the channeling. That's not in that bit though. Why do they all share the same blue eyes? Why do they feel inexplicably drawn to each other? Supernatural occurrences, first love and incredible truths are exposed in this epic adventure to wake up humanity and save the planet. The in-between. He waits and loathes every minute that ticks in the heart of humans and the time that goes by on planet Earth. He bides his time to avenge those who imprisoned him. Just one mistake is all it takes, and he will be free. And then the other part is, this story is a relevant explosion of human truth and highlights the plight of our planet played out in an angelic adventure that will truly make one's soul sing. Exploring heaven, human free will, faith and destiny, this is one thrilling celestial ride that you will not want to get off of. And if you look at all the reviews, I'm so grateful and humble because you really have absolutely adored this book. So there's my introduction. It's available at Amazon and all good bookstores. And as I say, I'll be working on the audiobook very soon. So enjoy my introduction to my absolute darling Earthwalkers. And I bet you can't wait for part 2. It's coming.